Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of day 2 of APSIA's Diversity Forum. I'm so glad to see all of you. It was wonderful to see many familiar faces this morning at our open chat with alumni. And here we're going to be talking today about building the confidence to compete. And we have some amazing speakers who are going to share their insights with you. As of course, a bit of housekeeping as always, I want to let you know that as we go through, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll do our best to get all of the information that you would find useful shared with you in the course of this conversation. Also, I always want to say thank you to my amazing team at APSIA, Melina Perez and Brianna Suarez, for all that they do to make these events possible, and to the investors in the Diversity Forum who enable us to put on this kind of programming for you, especially, of course, the Harvard Kennedy School, Uncomfortableness SICE, Clardy Associates, the Open Society Foundations, Princeton University's School of Public and International Affairs, Syracuse Maxwell School, the Bush School at Texas A&M, the Master of Public Diplomacy program at USC, and the Jackson School of International Studies at the University of Washington. Again, as always, as you need accommodations or particular support, feel free to reach out to us by direct message or email or any of those multiple methods of communication. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and turn the floor over to the amazing Marina Bruce from the University of California, San Diego.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, team at APSIA. My name is Marina Bruce, and I am happy to moderate this afternoon's session, Building the Confidence to Compete. Before we begin, I want to let you know that this session is being recorded, and I invite you all to turn your cameras on at this time, and please keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking to the group. As Carmen mentioned, please use the chat box to ask any questions of our panelists as they come to you, and we'll do our best to address them during the second part of the program. So on to the discussion. So on the panel this afternoon are Kirt Smith and Terry Thornton. They will be sharing their stories and lessons learned. And at this time, I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves. Why don't we start off with you, Terry?
Great. My name's Terry Thornton, born in Washington, D.C., raised in the Washington, D.C. area. For over 12 years, I've been working in this ESG space. So that stands for environmental, social, and governance factors used in sustainable investing, social investing, impact investing. There's a lot of names, but the field itself is blowing up right now. A lot of folks are interested in right now. So if you have any interest in that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm often talking to folks about the field. I went to the University of Maryland. I'm a Terp, local here. And I went to the Harvard Kennedy School for grad school, which was enabled by being able to go through programs like PPIA and other supportive programs. So happy to share my experiences, the ups, the downs. There are plenty of both, and just what I've learned and what might be helpful for this group.
Thank you, Terry. Kirt, do you mind introducing yourself to the group this afternoon?
Not at all. Thank you very much. And thank you, APSIA and Terry and Marina and Carmen for organizing this. And thank you, Terry, for also being here. My name is Kirt Smith, and I currently work at the Congressional Research Service. I am a research assistant in the Asia section. So my job is supporting the entire Asia section with any requests that come across in their portfolios. I am from New Orleans originally, and I've been in DC since 2017 after living in Asia for several years, bounced around Japan, China, Thailand, and South Korea. And I also did my master's degree in global policy studies at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas, Austin. So if anyone has any questions about getting into the Asia policy space, I know it's quite difficult, particularly for people of color in my experience, then I'm always very happy to help out and answer any questions and see what I can do to help.
Thank you for that, Kirt. Why don't we go ahead and dig into the discussion? So gentlemen, thinking back on your achievements to date, and there are many to consider between the both of you, can you tell us to what programs have you competed in the past? Terry, since you're to my left, why don't you
Sounds
start
good.
off?
I think the main one for me was PPIA, so Public Policy and International Affairs Fellowship. I'm sure many in this group hardly have heard of it. I was in college looking for something to do for the summer. It came in my inbox, and I said, "Okay, this looks neat." I didn't realize what a life-changing experience it would be for me. And the main thing for me was my biggest takeaway was it allowed me to think bigger. So where I'm from, where I grew up, hitting college was the biggest achievement that I could do. It was the biggest achievement in my family. I checked off that box. I'm good, and that's it. I never thought about grad school. I never thought I could compete in grad school. I thought I made it, I'm done. And this might come up throughout this conversation, but for me, each stage of my career, each stage of my life has been a recognition that, wow, there's something bigger. And that lack of awareness of what's bigger, what's out there, really limited me in a lot of ways. So PPIA opened up my eyes to grad school, to further learning, and it allowed me to really realize that I could complete those programs and that I could compete in those programs because I did well in them. And then in terms of other programs, I think more so in professional education, once you become a professional, the learning doesn't stop, right? Often your job may give you a professional education budget. Sometimes they don't. But you want to take advantage of any budget that's there. And what I did a lot of executive education programs, other professional education programs, certifications. And what I really wanted to do was target those areas that would strengthen my skill set, right? So I didn't have a finance background. So I went out and got a finance certification, paid for by my employer. So those kind of experiences really rounded out, the resume. It really rounded out me, my skill set, and just made it easier for me to get into industries, get into jobs that previously I wouldn't have been able to.
Let me follow up on that, and then we'll go to Kirt. But what questions do you think what questions do you remember asking yourself to know that opportunity was the right fit? I know you kind of alluded it to PPIA, but is there something else that maybe you had applied to thinking, is this the right fit? Am I the right person?
In terms of the right fit, it was mostly what industry do I want to get into? What problems do they have? And how does this help me solve those problems? So in my past, I've led a startup, a social enterprise, and I didn't have that social enterprise background or a finance background. But if you're going to be in a leadership position, you got to have some kind of finance background. P&L is the big buzzword that shows that you're moving up to a leadership position. That means profit and loss. You're directly responsible for the expenses and the profit generating activities. And you got to have some kind of background to do those things. So what do I need to do that job? What do I need to help solve this problem in an industry? And oftentimes I would look at, I can do this hard skill. I don't know if we use hard skill for soft skill for language anymore, but I can use this like quant heavy experience, or I can do this kind of management program. And I always lean toward, not that management programs aren't going to fulfill a need, they really do. But for me, it was, I needed more of that quant background. And if you're going to want to be a leader in your field, you have to be well-rounded. It's easy to be niche. It's easy to do what you do very well and progress in that one area. But if you really want to be a leader in that field, you got to take what you're learning, what you're doing, and expand that out to help solve multiple problems throughout that field, whatever you want to get into. So that was the question for me. It was like, looking at this program, what does this do for me personally, towards my skill set, and what does it do for the industry and the job I might be going into?
Very good, thank you. Kirt, can I ask you the same question? For what programs have you competed? And then following up, how did you know that this was the right fit for these types of programs, or what made you apply to these, compel you?
So I'll be completely honest that I actually got a very late start in life and to the game. There were a couple of personal emergencies and situations that kind of threw me off course when I began my academic endeavors in undergrad. And so I had to make small changes along the way in order to make sure that I ended up being okay, and also that I can continue to push forward on the right track and achieve my goals. And so I actually got into the Asia policy space by accident, but also going into what Terry said, how can I become well-rounded and more aware of other opportunities that are available to me? And it's that question I asked myself that enabled me to get into the Asia policy space. And that I was a French major in undergrad, and I was focusing on European studies. And when I decided to make the leap to become better rounded, I applied for a couple of foreign scholarships through the Department of Foreign Languages and also through the French department to study abroad. One of these was an academic ambassadorship to go study in Japan for a semester to do Japanese language and also learn about Japanese history and culture. And so that was the first thing of any type that I competed for. And I got the scholarship and went to Japan. And it was once I was on the ground that I realized, wow, this is a much bigger world than I originally realized, because I had a very sheltered upbringing. And at that moment, it was my last year of college, I realized, I want to be able to continue doing similar work in the international policy space. And so once I came back, I then competed for the National Model United Nations competition, which was a big confidence booster and a really great opportunity for me to solidify that I wanted to continue in this type of career, in this type of professional space, and also that I had the chops to be able to do it. And so after that, I went abroad, started working overseas, and then when I came back to start my master's degree, I then made a bid to go to China to do a year of my master's program. Now, more important questions that I asked myself along the way is, what skills do I need in order to be proficient and successful at what I'm going to do in China? And also, how will those skills translate into a career afterwards? Well, it doesn't look very good if you're an Asia policy / China analyst if you don't have any knowledge of the Chinese language. And so I put in an application to do an intensive Mandarin course through the CET program. And so I went to Beijing for 3 months and with no knowledge of Chinese. And by the time I finished that 3-month intensive course, I was already at an upper intermediate, lower advanced. So that way, when I started my coursework for the following year in China, I had the skills. And then when I went into the workforce afterwards, I could say, yes, I studied in China and I have the foreign experience plus the language chops as well. So those are the types of decisions that I had to make all along. And you just have to make sure that you look for opportunities that fit in with those questions that are both practical in order to succeed. So.
Thank you, Kirt. Now, this question is for the both of you. What questions or what do you think, what did you ask yourselves as, in terms of like, what did you ask yourselves to know whether or not you were maybe qualified for an opportunity? And it's kind of along the same vein, I know, but even if you didn't meet all the requirements, what, again, kind of compelled you guys to move forward and apply for some of these things and or any job that you have right now? So either of you.
Sure, yeah, I'll jump in. And I tell folks to do this all the time. While I am employed and happily employed, unhappily, happily, it doesn't matter. Occasionally I'll go out and apply for something that's a step above, even if I'm not qualified for it. So through that experience, I got some interviews knowing that, again, this is about confidence, but even then, I'm thinking, I'm not going to get it, but it's this interview experience. So at each stage of your career, the interviews change. They change very much. And what the kind of things you talk about, the kinds of things that employers are looking for at each stage of your career are very different. So getting that practice was essential for me when I was ready to make that leap. I wasn't quite ready, but the fact that I could get those interviews was a confidence boost. I'm like, oh, you know, this is the next stage up. I didn't think I was ready for it, but at least someone thinks I'm qualified to be in a pool, right, for this opportunity. And then those interviews turned into practice, and then at some point it stops being practice and starts being natural. And when I was ready to make the move, it made it a lot easier. So I've made substantial jumps in my career doing just that, you know, applying for jobs that otherwise I wouldn't be qualified for, but were kind of good practice and good understanding. Not that you know, employers don't want to hear that, you know, someone's just using you as practice, but it's another opportunity to see what else is out there as well. So even though you love your job, there might be something that appeals to you more. And if you're putting yourself out there a little bit like that, and I think you guys have had some networking conversations as well. Same thing, you know, networking, getting to know those organizations that you aspire to, all helps in terms of your natural growth and natural development.
Would you like me to jump in right now, or I see
Please.
Aaron has a question? Okay. Aaron Hamilton has a question if you want
Oh,
her to
please,
ask.
yeah, Aaron. Where's?
Yep. I don't see. Go
Oh,
ahead.
there you are. Hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this event today. Thank you so much to APSIA and to our panelists and our moderator. My name is Erin Hamilton, and my question is more so for Kirt, because I also have experience competing with National Model United Nations. And I'm curious to know how much weight you think that experience carries when you're trying to break into the international affairs field.
Okay. I'll answer your question first. So it carries, at the time I thought it carried a significant weight to it. When you get into the international relations field, you'll start realizing when you talk to your peers, or when you get into a space like DC, when you're constantly interacting face to face with other peers such as yourself, you'll start to realize that people have a lot of these types of experiences under their belt. So I will say it is very important, but in the grand scheme of things, it's also a drop in the bucket, and you can't just be complacent and sit back and be like, okay, I've got one big experience under my belt and that should be enough. No, because the more you talk, there's the saying goes that there's someone who has more qualifications than you, or more things under their belt for whatever reason, particularly if they come from a better funded background, like an affluent family, or they have these, we're at a disadvantage from being of color. We all know that that's true.
Yes.
And so when I got into this field, I realized, I don't have that many competitions or experience such as National Model United Nations under my belt. So what can I do to make myself stand out above the rest, because so many other people have this experience? And so that's when I decided to go abroad. And going abroad for both work and for school really does stand out. And now that I've started my career as an Asia specialist in DC, I have people telling me left and right, wow, you've got so much Asia experience. You're so qualified. Like, you have more Asia experience than anyone else. I was like, well, you know, that may be true, but also I still don't feel as qualified for many jobs that I apply for, because say I'm applying for a Korea policy position, there is someone who spent 4 years in Korea, whereas I've only spent 2. Or I went to apply for a program officer position working with Myanmar. Well, I've only had several months of working in Myanmar as opposed to maybe 5 years or whatever that someone else might want. So you have to continue, as Terry said earlier, working on your professional development throughout. You can't just sit back and wait for opportunities to come, or wait for professional development opportunities to just pop up on your radar. I constantly, even now, every day, I look for data science and analytics courses that I can do on my own. I do several hours a week of Chinese language training on my own on YouTube. I do several hours of GIS training for those of you who have GIS skills, because that's something I can always be stronger at, that stands out on a resume. And to Aaron's question, these are additional drops in the bucket that make your glass more and more full. So that way, when employers look at you, they're like, okay, you have National Model United Nations. A lot of other people do. What else does Aaron have that might help her stand out more? Oh, she's got international travel or study or work experience. She has gotten some language skills as well. And she's, oh, data science. That also just makes you stand out as a better rounded character. Like Terry said, he said the golden words that are going to be a very important theme throughout. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Yes.
I hope that
so
answers
much.
both questions.
Well,
I
I absolutely love that, Kirt. And if I can jump in and keep that train of thought going, another aspect of what Kirt was talking about, you might have 7 months here while someone else has 5 years. You might have 10 months here, someone else has 2 years. It's maximizing that time and being able to communicate what you've done there. And he mentioned resume. There are resume workshops, and I'm sure you've all taken resume workshops and everything. But the key for me in my career has been, what are the problems and how have I solved them? So even if I've been in place less time than someone else, I take that time to make sure that when I'm solving a problem or I'm doing an accomplishment. And I have a rule of thumb. Every single year I'm at a place, I have to develop a new skill set and I have to have a new accomplishment. And if I'm not getting those things, I'm moving on. And in the way that shows up on the resume, and at least the way I put it on the resume, title, year, location, briefly what my roles are, and then boom, in bold, I write challenges. What were the challenges of this role when I came in? What was I solving? What's going on? What were my contributions? And each of my bullets were then contributions and accomplishments. Not, I produced X, Y, Z reports. I was in charge of communications and marketing. No, it was, I improved processes by X%. I reached 10,000 people going above the KPIs in this education program. I did X, Y, and Z, and each one is an accomplishment. So, and something I often say, and Kirt hit on this, you have this experience. I always add this, and I say it with only beneficial motivations implied. So what? And I often do that. When I work with young folks on the resumes, I look through it, and I'm just like, don't be insulted, but I read this, I'm like, so what? So what? So what? Right? That you can ask yourself that as you're writing this down. What's, like Carla's writing something down. If Aaron has the same thing or someone else, maybe with those affluent backgrounds you're competing against, are writing the same things, what makes you stand out? And you're maximizing your time in those opportunities and making sure that you're growing. And then you can not only grow, and this is a challenge for me, and I think it's a challenge for people of color as well, communicating that growth, right? Communicating those accomplishments. How do you do it without bragging? How do you do these things to really set yourself apart? Yeah, I'll stop. I could go on and on. I think Kirt and I could go on and on about this, but Marina, thanks for indulging me a little bit and going that little rant.
It's really okay. There are so many different ways that we can go, but let's kind of stay on that theme in terms of, we all know how important it is to build your skill set. So no matter what level you're at, you should be building your skill set actively. You've got your day-to-day, but you should definitely be looking for opportunities to give yourself that background so that you compete. So not only that to build that skill set, but that you build your confidence and you can kind of move over to that next step. So let's stick to that vein in a way and talk about, what is the difference between bragging and showcasing your achievements, and how do you strike that balance?
Yeah.
That is a very good question. Yeah. Terry, do you want to take the first crack at it?
Sure. I'll take that in maybe a similar vein. So I often look at that as often as, with confidence versus arrogance. I think that's kind of similar in that vein. And to me, confidence is knowing my skill set, believing in my skill set, knowing I can solve problems, knowing I can contribute, knowing I have things of value to add, right? And it's also bringing other folks up to that level, right? Arrogance is bringing yourself up at the expense of others. It's saying, I'm better than that person at this, instead of, I'm very good at this. This is what I can contribute. It's not about me versus them, or it's not bringing others down to bring myself up. And when I see people are, accused of being arrogant, that's what I see, right? I see people that are very comparison driven. They're very putting themselves on top, and they're not doing it in a way that lifts up anyone. So I look at that question as kind of confidence versus arrogance. And then if I'm just displaying my confidence and really demonstrating what I've accomplished, then it's less about that arrogance. It's less about bragging. And another kind of tip that I've learned late in my career, just recently, and I've been really utilizing this, is just talking in numbers and metrics, because you're backing up what you're talking about. You're not saying it for the sake of saying it. You're not over exaggerating. You're just saying, I accomplished X, Y, and Z with these numbers. And folks don't, they don't really have much to say if they're looking to find cracks in your background, or or if they're judging you, or they're trying to see where you stand. When you just talk about what you've done and you can back it up with numbers. I love that Kirt was talking about data science. That's one of those things. That's a problem solving mechanism. That people would need more data relevant skills now more than ever, and it's only going to increase. So being an expert in presenting yourself, not just qualitatively, but quantitatively, and it gives you a real understanding of what you've done in your career. I look at my resume and I'm like, it's hard for me to believe some of the things I've done, right? Because, it's like you forget about it. People don't pat themselves on the back enough. I don't. You can get into imposter syndrome and all that good stuff. But, when you have it there and you have that record, it's also a confidence boost too. So, it's spending time on your resume to really talk about what you've accomplished rather than just what you've done, if that makes sense, and just putting some nice numbers around that.
I'll jump in on that. Terry pretty much hit the nail on the head. And building off of what he said, this goes back to what he mentioned earlier with this, how you translate and interpret and convey your skills into not only potential employers, but also doing that to address the so what question that many employers will see when they're reading on your resume. So for example, you can say, well, I've done this and I use this skill to accomplish this outcome. And these are the numbers to back that up. And the more you get that on your resume, the more impressive it will be. And then your potential employer or recruiter who's reading through will be like, oh, wow, okay, this person has a lot of things that they've produced with all these skills, and they seem very accomplished. Also, actions speak louder than words. And there's a saying that my aunt told me a couple of weeks ago. She said, the wisest person in a room is the person who doesn't say much at all, but who listens and does. And this is very true, particularly in DC. It might seem like you're competing with, there's so many people who are competing to just get FaceTime and, hey, hi, I have a question, and just, but people get bombarded by that, and they're always looking for, I guess not always, but the quiet ones tend to stand out a lot more. And also, as you build your professional networks, you'll start getting a reputation as other people the more people you know will start talking within the network saying, oh, well, do you know Melina Perez, by the way, she's done this and this and this. So I've heard from so-and-so that she's done that and that and that. The more you put yourself out there, and the more that people will recognize your work. There's nothing wrong with being confident. And also, particularly to all of the ladies out there who get accused of being bossy as opposed to just being confident, This is a big news flash that do not ever let anyone tell you that you are being bossy or arrogant because you are being confident in what you have to show to the world in terms of your employer. Do not let anyone tell you that, because I can't stress how much that really frustrates me. Simone Biles, if anyone follows gymnastics, is the best of all time, and the Olympics are starting soon. But there is an article where she went on the news saying that people often criticize her for saying that for taking pride in her accomplishments. And she simply said, well, I'm not boasting, I'm not bragging. My work speaks for itself. My accolades speak for themselves, and my accomplishments speak for themselves, and I can be proud of my accomplishments. And that's going to continue on with you throughout your career, and never let anyone tell you that you are being bossy or braggy or arrogant, because you can take pride in your accomplishments. Now, like Terry said, don't go out and just kind of wave your flag saying, I'm me, this is what I did. But if you're using your skills to help others, and always find ways that you can showcase your skills by helping others or contributing to a project, then that's going to speak volumes, as opposed to people who are always just trying to wave the flag for attention. So I hope that helps some.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now, along that vein, what do you think, how do you think students can, first of all, start building the confidence in sharing their narrative? I know you've kind of touched upon it a little bit, but what steps did you take? How did you even, were you very aware of that you were trying to build your confidence in these particular areas? But how did you build confidence in sharing your narrative? And what advice do you have for students?
So it's a fascinating question, because in many ways, this is something new to my generation. So I'm around 40 years old. Been out of grad school for 10 years, more than 10 years. But it's my generation. I think it's my parents' generation that, coming out, you don't really talk about your narrative. You don't talk about your background, what sets you apart, right? You got to fit in, right? You got to, all these folks that they knew how to navigate grad school and knew how to navigate the job market and had that support and maybe familial connections and the schools they go to and things like that. Like it just seemed like they know what to do. And I'm of a generation of like, you fake it till you make it. I don't know these things. I'm going to pretend. I'm going to talk the talk. I'm going to do all that thing. In some ways, obviously, it helped. I've gotten to places farther in my career than I ever would have thought otherwise. But in other ways, it was a drag. In other ways, personally, not being able to share my story or feeling scared to share my story. Being raised in less affluent places in Washington D.C., moving around. I have parents that are disabled. These are things I just never talked about and never let people know, because I just assumed that they would put me in this bucket of not being, good enough. But this is a muscle. This is something I'm learning now, and I feel like I'm learning it along with the new, the folks on this call, younger folks I mentor, of being your authentic self in the workplace, and workplaces are being more and more open about it. So so I don't have that much. I feel like I'm learning it along with these younger folks. But what it does is really got me in touch with, well, what are my strengths and where did those strengths come from? And it came from my upbringing. A lot of what I've had to grow up real fast, faster than most kids. And those experiences really shaped me and gave me a maturity beyond my years going through grad school, going through things. I was much more appreciative of things, which made me work harder than other people that might not have been appreciative of what they have or their station in life. So there are a lot of things that I'm still learning now that, I look back and I say, these experiences at the time felt very negative, but you always got to find the positive, and there were plenty of positives that I'm finding now, and I wish I found them a little earlier in my life.
Thank you for that, Terry. Before you move forward, Kirt, I think I want to say in this environment that we've been in for the last 18, 19 months almost for some of us, some of you guys have been in the workplace, some of you have been in the classroom, but for myself, a lot of these things are somewhat new. And sharing your narrative in the workplace is something that's really evolving, at least in theory, this last year and a half or so. It'll be interesting to see how things, what that looks like when we're actually, back in the office more days of the week than we are not in the office. Please, Kirt, anything to add to that?
It's never too early to start trying to tell your narrative, and there are two different ways I guess you could approach this. One goes into the confidence building route, which is where you're looking at all of your past experiences, whether they're academic, professional, or just your personal interests, and then seeing how they tie into what you're doing now or what you want to do moving forward. And so I started doing this when I applied for grad school, when I had to write my admissions essays. And then I got more experience when I was applying. I had applied for the Foreign Service, the Pickering and the Rangel Fellowships. And you have to write essays for that as well. And you have to do a very good job at summarizing who you are, making yourself stand out over the rest of the crowd. And so I always undersell myself, particularly in cover letters. And as everyone knows, cover letters are going to be something that you're going to have to write a lot and be very comfortable with writing. And I would ask others, I would practice with others. Like, for example, just I have some trusted friends that I run some lines by in terms of interview preparation, for example, and just explaining, X, Y, Z. And I get feedback from peers, friends, coworkers, etc. And it's funny seeing their responses in that, wow, you just left out a whole bunch of great stuff. You didn't even hit on anything very interesting. And so then I take their feedback and then I change whatever I am working on saying. And it's funny because whatever people are encouraging me to say, I sometimes am not comfortable about saying, but it's a very important part of my narrative. And I think that it's bragging, but then to other people, it just sounds, you should be proud of this accomplishment and don't be afraid to say it. And so that's why it always helps to have someone to run it by, someone who knows you well, and someone like either a coworker or a trusted friend. I have people check my cover letters. Every cover letter I write, I send it to someone to look over it, and typically the same group of people, because then after a while they know me very well and they say, wow, why did you leave this out? Even now I have everyone look over every essay and cover letter that I send out, because I always undersell myself. And like Terry said, there's a muscle that you have to work on and keep on developing, especially since if you're an introvert or you have to boost your self-esteem some more, that's a very good way that I would suggest that you can help learn how to tell your narrative in a way that both you're comfortable with and that other people are interested in as well. So that's what I have to add to that.
I would say that you were mentioning something I would connect to something earlier we were talking about, and that's networks, right? And networking is not just going out and finding people in a particular field that you want to go work in. That's important. You should be trying to do that. But it's also folks in similar situations, friends, colleagues, programs. So right now on my phone, I have about 20 messages that I missed over the past couple of days from folks from PPIA that I took 12 years ago, right? We all kept in touch. Excuse me. There's a social enterprise executive education program I took at Stanford. There's a group of 30 people. We became very close over that week. That happened 3 years ago. We talk every day. There's been 5,000 messages exchanged, I looked, between this group. I found an opportunity through that. I was lucky enough to have a sabbatical and I wanted to use that sabbatical to go international. And in this group, there was a woman that was leading a social enterprise in Panama, and she had a problem. You know, she said, I am trying to figure out this online learning thing for my social enterprise. That's what I do, a lot of what I do. So I reached out and I said, I want to come do this for free. I want to take my family and go live in Panama for a couple months. And I did. So without this group with, you know, that we shared something with and kept in touch with, I had those opportunities through there. And then it's also, you know, venting, it's understanding, it's learning about new opportunities. And, you know, and Kirt also hit on this, which made me think about it, the feedback mechanism. It's, hey, can someone look at this? Hey, can someone look at that? I want to do this. What are your ideas about it? So it's not just the professional network, right? You also want that network where, I don't know, I'm dating myself. You exchange memes, you talk jokes, you talk about what's important. Those networks are important as well. And you utilize those as well with feedback mechanisms and opportunities like that's essential as well. And that boosts you up too, you know, it's hard to do it on your own.
And may I jump in add onto that a little bit more with the feedback? I will say it is very uncomfortable when you start seeking out feedback. So, because you're in a way making yourself vulnerable. So just understand that that's a natural part of the process because you're opening up yourself. I'm very uncomfortable with my writing, but you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable because the more you progress in your career, as Terry mentioned earlier, like with imposter syndrome or even just exploring new opportunities that are unknown, you're going to be stressed out and uncomfortable. And that's just going to be a natural thing that you experience as you push yourself because you're not going to achieve unless you push yourself. And when you push yourself, it's like working out, you feel a little bit of pain and discomfort at first, but then eventually you get used to it and then you keep on getting better and better and better. So you get used to being uncomfortable. It's okay to be vulnerable when you seek feedback, but that's what's going to help you. I would rather people receive holistic feedback from other people as opposed to going it alone and then trying to sell yourself and you just go about doing it the wrong way, because then that could save you a lot of sorrow and anger. So
you really do want to rely, no matter what profession you find yourself in, using the networks that you have to help you move along in whatever process that you're going through is super helpful. So with that, let's take a question from Anissa. Anissa, what is your question?
Hi. So my question's inspired by what you guys were discussing right now. I'm Anissa. I'm a senior consultant in Washington, D.C., mostly focused on federal consulting. I studied international relations, and so my goal is to go back to graduate school and focus on that. But it's been pretty kind of daunting looking at the whole process and a little intimidating of everything that's due. And it was only after a really recent uncomfortable, vulnerable conversation with a mentor of mine where I realized a lot of these fears were holding me back, and it was that process. So I was wondering if you guys could talk. I know you've talked about this importance of the community. Could you talk specifically about some of the mentorships that you've had, maybe even those conversations or those learning lessons that you got from that interaction that helped you with this process that is a bit, the graduate school process that's, a bit complicated?
I'll take a crack if you don't mind, Terry.
Yeah,
so I relate a lot to what you just said, Anissa, because when I spent probably 3 years looking for a grad school program that was the right fit. And then it took me 3 years because I was constantly holding myself back by thinking, oh, I'm not qualified. Oh, I'm not qualified. Oh, there's no way I'll get into that. But I just took a leap of faith and submitted one application and another application and another application. And this goes back to what Terry said earlier, and the whole question of if you think you're qualified, in many cases, you're more qualified than you think you are. And it's good if you don't think you're qualified enough, because that shows that you're humble and you're not overly confident. So that feeling is okay if you don't feel qualified enough. That's a good feeling because that means that you're on the right track. But the best advice, and it sounds cliche, is you never know unless you try. And it's better to have tried and not succeed in reaching an opportunity, as opposed to not even taking a step in that direction and never knowing. And as Terry mentioned earlier as well, with every interview and experience, that's more experience that helps you get stronger. I would never be able to even do so well with public speaking if I didn't have interviews and talk to strangers, because I'm very introverted. I have social anxiety, and I also have a minor speech impediment. And so, but after doing a lot of interviews, after with lots of practice, it made me a lot stronger. And so my point being is keep applying, keep pushing yourself, because it will be stressful, it will be uncomfortable, but you just have to keep on putting yourself out there. And I know might not be the answer that everyone wants to hear, but it's a lot of hard work, it's tiring, and it's a very daunting process. There is a lot that you will have to get prepared in order to apply for grad school. And start now, do a little bit every day to either look at the general things that you will need. But I like to give myself some time to prepare application materials as well. And then that also gives you time to get feedback from people to help with looking over your letters of statements of interest, etc. But in my career, I've applied for many things, many fellowships that I thought I had no chance in the world of getting. And I surprised myself by getting another one and another one and another one. And it keeps on building on itself over the course of your career. It's a little bit hard when you start out, but the more you get under your belt, the more well-rounded you appear. And then the easier it becomes to get better and better opportunities. So just, I guess that's what I can say to start out with. Terry, if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying really resonates, because it's that embracing that feeling uncomfortableness, whether it's the feeling of failure, imposter syndrome. I feel all of it, and I know, I have close friends that are able to overcome it. You can overcome it, but everyone experiences it differently. And for me, I don't overcome it. I live with it. So I wish that I could just overcome it and get over it. I don't. Some people can. I'm not one of them. So if you feel like, you can't shake that feeling, it's okay, because if you can learn to tolerate it and live with it and recognize it, that's the main thing. You have to be able to recognize it to be able to live with it. At least in my case, then the failures become a lot easier to stomach, and there will be. It's one of the things. I came out of grad school right when the housing bubble popped and we had a major recession in 2008. So I made it through college. I made it to grad school. I put in all this work. I was ready to go out and get that dream job and do all that. There was nothing. They weren't hiring, especially young people. So it was failure after failure after failure. And I wouldn't even use the word failure. It was just I wasn't able to. There were no opportunities. You can't fail if there's no opportunities. It was really this embrace of I know I'm doing my best. I'm working at it. I'm self-improving. That's an accomplishment, right? I don't need that validation of someone in an HR, and for a company to say I'm good enough. It's like, I am good enough. I'm doing all these things. It shows on my resume all my accomplishments, all these things. Like I can get there at some point, and then I did, because and just a quick sidebar, there are 1,000 reasons why you won't get an opportunity. 1,000. You'll never know what those reasons are, whether a job, internship, like, that job, they might have already lined up an internal candidate. You could have been perfect. Could have been your dream job. You'll never know, right? Maybe they took that job off and didn't hire anyone. That happens pretty often as well. You'll just never know. They just say, you're lucky if you'll get, thanks for coming in, we decided to go another direction. So I just do not be wrapped up in not getting that dream job or that dream opportunity. Is be wrapped up in doing your best and improving yourself, and that stuff will work itself out. Because again, I want to reiterate this, now that I'm on the hiring side and progressed in my career and leading bigger organizations, things like that, there are 1,000 reasons why good applicants do not get the job. And so my number one recommendation is just, again, this, Kirt and I are reiterating this over and over and over, self-improvement. Yep.
Anything to add to that, Kirt?
Nope. That's just, I know that you have a lot going on now that you're with work or applications or school, but it is never too late to just start little by little every day with the self-improvement, looking and being proactive as opposed to reactive, because you would rather, it takes time to develop skills, and you don't want to overwhelm yourself by trying to like do oh my gosh, I want to do a data science course like within like a couple of months and learn this coding skill in order to like be more competitive for a job application that's due or for grad school on the horizon. But start now, because you would rather just go into it knowing that you have some of that over time and are comfortable and not resentful of the time and energy that you put into developing those skills over time.
And I think it's easy, particularly in college, right out of college, of not falling into the trap of not knowing all the options there are to move forward. I mean, there's so the way I approach it is, I don't look at, what's the job I want or what's the industry I want. I look at, well, what's the problem I want to solve? Like, what do I want to dedicate to either fixing or being involved in, or and then that opens up other avenues towards that. It's not just this fellowship, this particular grad school. If you have a goal in mind that's more problem solving oriented, there are many ways to get there. And that's for me, I was always a social advocate, right? I wanted to change the world like everyone does, and I wanted to go out and do that. And what I did was I really identified what I really was trying to accomplish. And that led me down actually the finance route, where I'm engaging the world through social finance that's having a positive impact in the areas I want to, through a completely different mechanism than traditional social advocacy. And for me, it was, there are many other ways to get at this. And I kind of, by the field I'm in now didn't really exist 15 or 20 years ago. I kind of made my own way and figured out my own path in grad school. I took classes at the business school. I wanted a policy degree. I went to the Kennedy School, but I also took classes in the education school and the business school to kind of form my own degree, my corporate social responsibility, ESG, social finance kind of degree that didn't exist. So, and then eventually that became a real field and I was ready for it. So that path wasn't laid out to me, but there were things I knew I wanted to do, and I just had to figure out my own way to do that, and it wasn't traditional at all. So be open to alternatives and go out and search those alternatives.
Thank you for that. It is so important from that admissions standpoint that's my daily realm. It is so important to understand what the curriculum is going to look like at the schools that you want to apply to. So it's important to know what it is you may want to do, or maybe what realm you want to find yourself in, but it's also equally important to understand what kind of skills you're going to gain at the particular school that you're applying to. So good luck to all the students who will be applying to graduate school in the future. Keep that in mind as you're moving forward. And again, another shameless plug for tomorrow with regards to the myths and realities for applying to grad school. That is tomorrow's talk. So please join the APSIA team again for that. At this point, we need to wrap it up. I really do want to thank Kirt and Terry for joining us today and imparting their wisdom and lived experiences. Right now, we have a brief Zoom evaluation poll. So for those of you that are still with us, if you can just stick around for a second and answer those questions that have just been thrown on the screen, that would be wonderful.
Marina, while folks are filling out the poll, we did have one other question. If
Oh,
I
yes,
missed her.
please.
Yes.
I might have missed it myself. I'm so sorry. Please. Who has that
Sorry?
question? I
Yeah.
don't.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to really thank the panelists and the moderator for today. And I actually wanted to ask Terry a question in relation to his career path. I feel like I resonate a lot with you right now. So I'm in that trailblazing, I guess what you were saying, right? Making your own position. And it's kind of scary, right? And I guess I wanted to see if I could talk to you a little bit more about that and in regards to corporate social responsibility and how you navigated that, because that's something that's kind of been on my mind, and not a lot of people have done it, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. And I mentioned this at the beginning, but definitely Carmen or Marina, if there's a mechanism to share my information, happy to do that. And yeah, happy to have any follow-up conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
And give me Kurt's too. We're gonna hang out and talk more. Like this, I can't believe an hour.
Yeah.
An hour went by really fast, really fast.
Yeah, yeah, and absolutely more than happy to have further conversations with everyone, because going back to the advice that people have shared with me that really resonated is, one gentleman in the China policy space said, we don't have the luxury of being divided or going on the individual route as people of color, because we all know, perfectly honest, that we already start several paces behind when the race starts and the gun goes off. He said that we have to do everything possible to build each other up, help each other out, be resources for each other, and look after one another, or else we're just going to continue being fractured, and other people will swoop in and get the jobs that we want, or we're just going to stay behind. And whether you agree with that or not, that's not the point, that's the reality. And so I'm very happy to pay it forward. And as Terry said, we don't feel like you're bothering us. We got here because people helped us. I certainly wouldn't be here without the help and willingness to help from others. And I acknowledge that. And so I dedicate a lot of my energy, and I'm very open to helping out anyone who's coming up behind. So yes, feel free to reach out. Don't feel like you're bothering us.
Mentors and role models are super important, and especially in your professional life. So again, thank you both gentlemen for your generosity in allowing people to reach out. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, audience, all very much for your time and your good questions. And with that, I will end today's session, and just be sure to come back tomorrow.